I'd never been to Mumbai before. So one of the moments that struck me was just the level of visible poverty around me, that I could go from home to work every single day and the poverty is just around me. And I realized that very soon I could just be wearing invisible blinders and ignore the poverty around me. And when I realized that when that was happening, I didn't want that to happen. So then I started engaging with why is there so much poverty on the streets? Why are there kids on the street? This actually, Sujata gave me a beautiful insight in those days. She said there's one approach of a leader, which is my approach, which is that I have a vision and I'm running towards that vision. And I don't care whether someone is running as fast as me or not. When I turn back and I see that the team is way behind, and then I'm literally dragging the team. So at one level, I'm running at 100 meters, 100 miles an hour kind of speed. But at another level, I'm dragging the team towards my vision. The other approach, which is her approach, it is that you start with where the team is at and you work together and you walk together. So it's not so much that you need to reach a certain destination. It's more important that you're walking together.
Not everything that matters needs to be loud. Some conversations help you pause, some help you see differently, and some stay with you long after they end. Welcome to Inspire Someone Today, my dear listeners, a space for honest conversations about life, work, and the choices that shape who we become. No quick fixes, no borrowed certainty, just real stories, thoughtful reflection, and the quiet courage to live with intention. This is Inspire Someone Today, where conversations are human, reflective, and meant to stay with you. Listeners of Inspire Someone Today, welcome back. Change doesn't always begin with action. Sometimes it begins with awareness. In this episode of Inspire Someone Today, I sit down with Vishal Talreja, someone who learned early that good intentions aren't enough if systems remain unchanged. From working closely with young people growing up with adversity to building ecosystems that nurture life skills and inner strength, Vishal's journey is a reminder that lasting change starts within and then scales outward. As part of our Changemaker series, this conversation isn't about fixing the world overnight. It's about seeing differently, designing thoughtfully, and taking responsibility for the systems we shape. No slogans, no shortcuts, just a humane, reflective conversation on what it truly takes to make change endure. It's an absolute joy to have Vishal grace over this episode. Vishal, let's begin and welcome to the show.
Thank you, Shrikant. It's an honor to be here with you.
For someone hearing about it for the first time, Vishal, what is Dream a Dream?
Dream a Dream is a non-profit organization, or NGO as more popularly known, based out of Bangalore in India, focused on working with children and young people growing up in adverse circumstances and helping them build the capabilities and life skills needed to thrive in an increasingly fast-changing world.
And what has been Dream a Dream been able to do so far till date, Vishal?
Dream a Dream was started in 1999, so a little over 25 years old. In these 25 years, we have directly worked with over 400,000 kids in Bangalore from the age group of 6 to about 23. Helping them develop life skills through our various programs and helping them making more meaningful transitions into adulthood. In addition, over the last decade or so, we have been working with various state governments. We currently work with 7 state governments across the country, helping them introduce curriculums, pedagogical changes, and assessment practices, all geared towards holistic development of every child going into the government school system. And these partnerships with the state governments have helped us reach about 1.8 to 2 million kids. In addition, one of the things that we've been working on is how do we mainstream the idea of life skills? That in addition to academics, numeracy and literacy, life skills are also a very critical foundational element for every child to learn and master if they have to find their own pathways to success and build their own ideas and definitions of success in a world that's changing very fast. So we can say over the last 2+ decades, managed to mainstream this idea that life skills are equally important. And we have now seen many organizations across the country integrating life skills, social emotional learning interventions in the constituencies that they are working in.
It's a interesting take, Vishal, making life skill as mainstream. And this is definitely coming out of a need that you want the students, the kids to thrive in an ever-changing environment. Pure academic skills will help, but what will add an edge is that life skill. Could you elaborate a bit more on that, the criticality of having that? And it's just not for kids going to government schools. It is for kids across all age groups, across all different mediums of schools, isn't it?
So we define life skills broadly as any kind of skills, capabilities, behaviors that every individual needs to deal with demands and challenges of daily living. So like you rightly said, this is a skill that we all need, we all develop, and we all have to navigate life's complexities. Life skills becomes critical in the case of kids growing up in adverse circumstances for a couple of reasons. One is that the pace of change in the world is increasingly fast and uncertain. There's enough evidence and research around in the world which says that kids in the schooling system today are going to enter jobs and careers that are not even being invented yet. So in that case, we can't necessarily prepare kids for specific job markets or specific careers, like maybe our parents did for us. That you study, do well in college, become an engineer or a doctor or a lawyer or a teacher, and you will be set for life. That's no longer true. There are other studies that say that young people growing up today will have multiple careers in their lifetime as an adult, which means they will need to have the capacity to adapt, be resilient, be willing to change, shift, unlearn, relearn. Now, this is relevant for every child, irrespective of the backgrounds that they come from. The key difference for kids coming from adverse circumstances is that in the early years of growing up, in the first 5 to 10 years of growing up, when children experience any kind of adverse circumstances, this could be lack of food and nutrition in the home, this could be neglect in the family environment, it could be in extreme cases exposure to violence, abuse, displacement, extreme poverty, war. Any and all of these adverse circumstances lead to children not achieving developmental milestones that every child needs to achieve at a certain age. So a good example of that is that if you have a child, an infant, who's learning to crawl, they will not suddenly start running. Right? They will learn to crawl, then they learn to stand up, then they learn to walk, and then they learn to run. Each of these are developmental milestones. And if you have infants or kids in your own home or around you, you will see that when they achieve these developmental milestones, everyone around them celebrates. And everyone around them knows that at a certain age, this milestone needs to be achieved. Everyone knows that the age of 12 months, 14 months is when the child starts developing language skills, starts speaking. If they don't, then you're worried. Why is it not happening? Adverse circumstances cause trauma. And trauma results in children not achieving their developmental milestones at the right sensitive period, which leads to what we call failure to thrive. Now, the most common example of that in extreme poverty conditions is the key difference in height and weight. So if you take a 13-year-old from an international private school, make them stand next to a 13-year-old from an impoverished community in Bangalore going to a government school, you clearly see a height and weight difference. But it's not just limited to that. It's also limited to emotional regulation, emotional maturity, is limited to other developmental milestones. Now imagine when a child growing up in adversity has had a failure to thrive, and then at the age of 4 or 5, when they enter the school environment, they're entering a one-size-fits-all school environment where every child, irrespective of the adversity and the impact of that adversity, is expected to learn the same things in the same way at the same pace, because that's how it's designed. But the child is not geared up for that learning. So then the gaps just keep increasing and increasing and increasing, and finally resulting in, at some point, the child giving up, or the child getting disengaged. Now, some of these collapses in developmental milestone can also be seen as adults in behaviors. So, for example, if a child has been abandoned in the early years, they grow up with confused attachment, which means if they're growing up in a care home, they will make relationships very easily. When strangers come, volunteers come to meet them, they come close to them very easily. Now, if this is not addressed, then at 18, 19, when they go out into the world as independent adults, they might end up in abusive or violent relationships. So it's very important to recognize that the impact of adversity leading to failure to thrive is a critical component that is distinguishing children growing up in marginalized backgrounds in poverty from other children growing up in supportive environments. Life skills plays a very important role in bridging that gap, helping children overcome these failures, catch up to developmental milestones, and also engage positively with learning, including even gaining height and weight over a period of time, which we have seen in our own work, in our own research with young people. So that is why life skills becomes extremely critical.
Hey, with that thought, we'll quickly get back to that particular element in a bit. So apart from being a founder, Vishal, why is this work deeply personal to you?
Well, I started this work at the age of 21. So this is all I've known in that sense. But I didn't design my career for it. I grew up in a typical middle class, lower middle class family environment where my parents told me education is the key to success. Education is the key out of poverty. So I was all geared up to do well, join a corporate ladder and be successful. But at the age of 21, just after I finished college, I got a chance to go to Finland on an exchange program. My first trip abroad, the first kid in the family to travel abroad. I took up the opportunity. And that was for the first time I saw a very different world. Finland, because of its strong social welfare economy system, has very high dignity of labor and a sense of respect for every job, every human being. So I could become friends with the security guard at a 5-star hotel, a bartender at a local bar, to a software engineer, to a professor at the university. But each one of them had the sense of dignity and respect about who they were and the roles they played in society, which is not so true in the environment I grew up in. Even though I grew up in a poor neighborhood, even within that, because of caste and class differences, there are some kids that I was not allowed to play with. There are some kids that I couldn't be friends with. And I believe that's how society functioned till I saw what was possible in Finland. And I liked this idea of every human being treated with respect and dignity. So I came back to India with this idea that I wanted to do something in India that promotes this idea of respect and dignity. Talked to a bunch of friends who were already thinking of some ideas to work in communities. The 12 of us got together and Dream was born. But none of us believed that it could be an independent organization itself. We were all getting into our careers, building pathways, but running Dream as a voluntary organization for a couple of years, we realized that there was potential in the idea. And we reached a place where we realized that one or more of us need to take a step forward and start building in, or we'll have to let go of the idea. So I was going through my own personal dilemmas around, should I build my corporate career and go after what I had initially planned, or should I move into Dream full time, learn from my mistakes, learn about the work and build this up. After a lot of trepidation, I decided to move in full time. And that was it. Then I've not looked back. But the idea of respect and dignity for every human being is what grounds me to this work.
So this was the moment when that concern became a commitment, or was there a moment that really said, this is it, this is what you're committing to this particular cause?
There were many moments. While Dream was running in Bangalore, I got a job to work with an investment bank in Mumbai. So I moved to Mumbai. I'd never been to Mumbai before. So one of the moments that struck me was just the level of visible poverty around me, that I could go from home to work every single day and the poverty is just around me. And I realized that very soon I could just be wearing invisible blinders and ignore the poverty around me. And when I realized that when that was happening, I didn't want that to happen. So then I started engaging with why is there so much poverty on the streets? Why are there kids on the street? I started volunteering with local organizations in Mumbai, spending time with founders, spending time in the field. The more I understood, the more questions I had. So one was that moment when I realized that I'm drawn towards trying to understand the complexity of the challenges. I'm drawn towards finding a solution for it. And I'm drawn towards the idea of that every human being deserves respect and dignity, and they can't live their life on the streets the way they were doing.
And in that process, you have authored quite a few white papers. You're also author of a couple of books. One of it is When We Thrive, Our World Thrives. What a beautiful title of the book. Is there any story that kind of comes to your mind that helped reshape how you saw possibility?
Oh my God, all the stories in that book are like that. One of the stories I can talk about is this young woman, Pallavi, who came into our program and she was probably 13 or 14 years old. One of the few young women who chose to join our sports program and wanting to play football. So she had to go through much bullying and laughter in the community because she chose to play football, which the community was considered a boys' game. But she was also an introvert. She was very quiet as a girl, hardly spoke. I remember meeting her the first time. She wouldn't even look up to me. So her head was always down. But she was amazing at football. And then she got an opportunity to go to Brazil during the Football World Cup that was hosted there as a young leader. And there she had a chance to even host a workshop for other young people from all parts of the world. And she got a chance to see a couple of matches as part of the World Cup. And that truly transformed her. So when she came back, she decided to join us as a life skills facilitator, started working with other kids in the community as a trainer and facilitator, as a life skills coach. But the amazing thing was that she realized that the neighborhood she was staying in was getting gentrified very quickly, which means from being a slum neighborhood, because it was closer to the city, it was being sold and big buildings and apartments and commercial complexes were coming up. And so the poor communities were being pushed further out of the city. And there were no public spaces for children to play in. So then, as a young 22-year-old, she lobbied with a local politician, the local school leaders, principals of local schools, parents, philanthropists living in that community, and managed to convert a garbage mound into a play space for children, a public play space for children. And that for me was the real possibility, that when young people build life skills, start to build a sense of agency and ownership, they don't just use it for their own success. They use those skills to also transform their communities. And she managed to do that. And today in that community, in addition to working with us as a facilitator, she's very well known as a young leader whom the community can reach out to for any challenges that they're facing in the community, almost making our role in the community redundant, which is exactly what we want.
That's exactly what you wanted to, right? So what a powerful story. And you kind of in a nice way close loop on that life skill bit of it, which we started off earlier. So that life skill is not something that you kind of prepare that will aid you in search of job, but that will help you, that stays with you for life. That's why it's called as a life skill. Any other such stories that comes to your mind that kind of talks about the art of possibility, that you're very proud of what your words from Dream or Dream has been able to accomplish?
Well, the other story from the book that is very powerful is of this young man, Prasanna. Now, Prasanna grew up again in an extremely poor neighborhood in Bangalore, riddled with substance abuse, drugs, local gangs, crime. It still is that neighborhood. He somehow managed to escape that situation, landed up in a residential school run by another NGO with whom we partnered, and we started working on life skills programs with them. Prasanna came from a relatively violent family background where his father was an alcoholic and used to beat up the kids, beat up the mother. So Prasanna always carried this sense of anger, and he believed that the only way to resolve conflict in life is to use violence. which is what he also did in school, which is what we did in the programs we presented. But we realized, having understood that these are behaviors that come from environments and can be shifted, we helped him channelize a lot of his violence and anger into the sport. We used to play field hockey, a program that we used to run. He ran for almost 11 years. And he became one of the best hockey players we had in the team, but also helped him then learn to resolve conflict with more peace building efforts across school and life. Again, at the age of 18, he reached out to us, said, I want to join again as a life skills facilitator. Did very well, and became a trainer where he trains teachers in government schools on life skills pedagogical approaches. But his real passion was photography. So then he joined our communications team. And today he's part of the communications team at Dreams Room as a photographer, as a videographer, makes some beautiful movies about our work. But the story, the real sense of possibilities is, when he was a life skills facilitator, one day he called me and he said, I need to talk to you. I've had an insight and I want to share it with you. So he came up to office, we sat down and he said, when I was a kid and when my father used to beat me up, I used to get very angry and I used to wait for the day when I become big so I can stand up to my father and hit him back when he tries to hit me or my mother or brother. And he said, and I realized today, as I was running a life skills session with the kids, that my father didn't have the childhood that he deserved. He probably didn't have the support systems that I got as a child, that I could channelize a lot of my anger and change my behaviors. So I'm not angry with my dad anymore. I understand where he comes from. I still don't believe his behavior is right, but I understand where it's coming from. Now, that level of empathy for a young man of 20, 21 being developed and to see his dad's story from a whole different light was for me this amazing sense of possibility that young people can truly transform the world.
Absolutely. And with both of the stories, what have been able to highlight, Vishal, is with the right intervention at the right time, there is a possibility that you can amend what has not happened and make a positive difference to the community.
Absolutely. Yes.
Wonderful. Thanks for sharing that. While Finland gave you a perspective, Mumbai gave you a different kind of a perspective. Was there anything else, any kind of a disappointment that genuinely shook you, that made you to kind of be the person that you are today?
Well, the work itself is filled with failures, right? Because you can't necessarily, one is not always able to support every child. We have lost children to suicide, violence, drugs, to even to police atrocities. And we've been part of those stories. For me personally, again, because I didn't necessarily come from an education about this work, like it was something that I just kind of stumbled into. One is I didn't recognize the complexity of the challenge, that there are layers to the challenge. For me, it was a very simplistic approach that let's work with this, let's bring some joy into their lives, let's play sports, do arts, and kids will do great. But as I got entrenched in their lives and their stories, you start realizing how the system parents children from certain backgrounds to side. If you belong to a certain caste or a religion or a minority group, the odds are stacked up against you. And then there are complexities with the families themselves, the complexities in the neighborhoods you're living in. And then there are complexities that come as children grow up, right? Suddenly you realize at the age of 14, 15, in the first 7, 8 years of our work, as we saw the kids we worked with at the age of 8, 9, 10, when they hit 14, 15, we started losing them. And we were like, why are we losing these kids? Why are these kids not continuing in school? And why are we not continuing into our programs? To realize that while most of us who come from supportive family backgrounds have to think about our future at the age of 18, 19, 20, 21, these kids had to start contributing to their families at 14, 15. At 14, 15, either they were asked to drop out of school and start working, start earning, or the families were scared for the kids, so they decided to take them away from school and keep them at home till they get married. which was something that we had not obviously understood. The context we didn't know. So then recognizing that if we have to continue to support these kids, we have to have a whole set of different interventions at 14, 15. And then we also have to start working with parents. And that at the societal level, we have to shift narratives around the kids coming from different backgrounds, narratives around caste and class and religion. So we've lost quite a few kids, and it's been a difficult journey in that sense. It continues to be a journey where we actually continue to challenge some of these old narratives around children and young people in our country.
I kind of understand the enormity of this. And in a very heavy work like this, how do you sustain yourself emotionally?
Now we are much better. Now, as an organization, we have internal support systems. We have mental health support for all our team members. We have cultures of well-being within the organization itself, of support, of rest. So now we are much better, but we didn't start off like that. Again, I had never run an organization, never built a team, never been a leader of an organization. The only thing I understood was that there's a complex challenge and we need to solve it, we need to address it. So personally, I used to, in those early years, work 7 days a week, work like 14, 15 hours a day. I would come up with ideas at like 3 a.m. and send it out to the team and expect responses at 6 a.m. So I was very driven, and I didn't believe that my passion or drive will reduce over time. But it did. So I did burn out. But more importantly, what happened was it didn't help the people who came and worked with us. It almost felt like we don't care for the people who come and work with us. And we are expecting them to also work 14, 15 hours a day, give up their lives, give up their relationships, and just be as committed to the cause as I am. So that expectation was not the right expectation. So we didn't do very well in offering emotional support to either myself or to the team members or as an organization, which meant that a lot of people would work for a couple of years and then they couldn't do this work anymore. The emotional burden was just too much. The expectations were too high. And what was sad is that even though they had done extremely good work, they left with this sense of feeling like failures, which again, as a culture, we didn't necessarily build enough support systems to celebrate successes. My approach was always that when we hit a certain milestone, instead of taking a pause and celebrating that milestone, I was already looking at the next summit to climb. But over the years, I've learned to shift my approach as a leader, learn to understand that this is a marathon, not just one marathon. This is multiple marathons. And multiple marathon means that there needs to be periods of rest, rejuvenation, nurturing. There needs to be sense of celebration at the end of every marathon. So that I've learned only in the last maybe 7-8 years.
Let's pause here for a moment. You may have noticed one idea quietly settling in. Something that doesn't need an answer, just awareness. Inspire Someone Today has always been about conversations that stay with you beyond the episode. Sometimes they continue in reflection, sometimes in action, and sometimes in community. If you'd like to engage beyond the podcast, there is an IST community where these conversations are carried forward thoughtfully. And if you prefer your own quiet space, the book, Inspire Someone Today, gathers many of these ideas for slower reflection. Let's continue. Now that reflection is awesome. While you know you have a mountain to climb, there's so much out there to do. And it is only natural that you run that race like 16, 18 hours kind of stuff. And it's also very telling to say that you had that realization. You didn't kind of brush it under the carpet saying that this is how it is, but you realized you did something. Was it a pivot moment for you to move from programs to systems kind of an approach?
It was, yeah. Well, 2-3 pivot moments. One is at the 10-year mark, we had worked with about 10,000 kids directly in Bangalore. We were a small, credible organization based out of Bangalore doing good work. But the question we were sitting on is that if it's going to take 10 years for us to work deeply with 10,000 kids, then how will we ever reach 130, 40 million kids that are growing up in poverty in India? So the first pivot was to recognize that we need a leverage. We need to understand what is the leverage that will help us reach more kids. For that, we had to go back and understand that if we strip away everything that we're doing in our programs, in our life skills development programs, and pick one leverage point, one core idea that can be scaled out, what could that be? And what we discovered, which our children helped us discover, is what the young people valued most in our programs was the sense of care and respect they received from the adult in the relationship. So it was not the snacks, it was not the sports, it was not the arts, it was not the exposure to opportunities. It was that every time they encountered an adult from Dream a Dream, they felt cared for, they felt respected.
Empathy.
Yeah. So we said, okay, so we've got millions of teachers in the country. What will it take for us to unlock this level of empathy among teachers already in the education system? So we spent 3 years developing a new pedagogical approach, worked with clinical psychologists, child psychologists, partners from different parts of the world to build a design to work with teachers. Initial pilots were not so successful, so went back to the drawing board, see where our own biases and prejudices were coming from, worked on ourselves, went back into the field, and it started working. So over a period of a decade or so, we worked with about 70,000 odd teachers across the country. But then we realized that even at 70,000 teachers, we're not able to hit 130 million kids. So the next pivot point was, of course, to work with the government. But we realized that we have to be ready to work with the government, because when you work with the government system, scale is just expected. Are we ready? Are we ready for that scale? Do we have the teams that are ready for scale? Again, realize that as an institution, we had also hired people who were invested in working with one child at a time or a group of children. Right? So the mindset was around direct work. But now if you wanted to leverage to working with governments, that you're then working with a bureaucrat or the school principal, or you're working with 1,000 schools at a time, it needs a very different mindset. It needs a different skill set. So we also had to redesign our org structure, to redesign what kind of people we hire. At the same time, not letting go of where our insights are coming from, which is the direct work. So we decided not to scale our direct work, but keep it at about 10,000 kids a year. Continue to work with about 2,000 teachers a year. So we continue to get access to the system of the community of teachers, but start shifting the gears towards working with government systems. So that was the other big pivot, a big breakthrough for us when we started working with the Delhi government and with a group of other nonprofits and a team from the Delhi government, a group of mentor teachers from the government. We helped design and implement the happiness curriculum, which was a well-being focused curriculum that the government introduced for 800,000 kids from kindergarten to grade 8, every day, 35-minute happiness and well-being classes for 800,000 kids. It was a big breakthrough for us. Right? However, COVID gave us a very different pivot. COVID happened, everything shut down. And what we realized is how the systems of inequity, the systemic barriers, the structural inequities that exist in our society because of caste, class, religion, identities, gender, it played out. Kids who had developed the life skills, had gone out into the world and gotten jobs and were on the path of thriving, suddenly lost jobs. With no support systems, with no severance pay. Kids who came from poverty, they didn't get access to healthcare systems, they didn't get access to ambulances, they didn't get access to even cemeteries or to bury or cremate their loved ones. These became very, very real at COVID. So when we came out of COVID, we realized that empowering young people with life skills so they can go out and negotiate their way into the world and thrive is one side of solving the problem. The other side of solving the problem is we also have to remove these systemic barriers and structural inequities that exist in our society. Unless we do that, there'll be some kids who will have the resilience and the willpower to fight through the system and succeed, but the majority of the kids will not. For example, in COVID, again, if you were born into a lower caste, when schools started virtual classes, you didn't get access to those virtual classes because your parents didn't have access to a smartphone, right? Or if you had access to a smartphone, the data got over very quickly, so you couldn't do the lesson plans, right? Kids who were extremely good in academics ended up dying by suicide because they felt like failures because they couldn't access school during those school closures. When schools opened, instead of creating spaces for children to kind of come out of the trauma, heal, reintegrate back into a regular life, what happened was children were pushed straight into catching up to academics, catching up to the syllabus that was lost out of. Right? And kids who didn't have access to virtual classes couldn't catch up. So then they started dropping out of the system en masse. So these systemic barriers exist in our society. So over the last 5-6 years, a big part of our work has been around how do we help people in positions of power recognize that because of the identities that I carry, who am I leaving out? Who am I making invisible? Because of the biases and prejudices I carry, who am I making invisible in the system? For that, the first work we had to do ourselves within ourselves. So for example, I had to encounter my identity as an upper caste, upper class, cisgender, heterosexual, Hindu, male, in a position of leadership. Over 25 years of this has been my identity, and these are the powers that have carried into my identity. Who have I made invisible because of this? Whose voices have I not heard? Whose context have I not understood? What have I not understood about these systemic barriers? How have I caused some of these systemic barriers? What are my belief systems that are preventing kids from adversity to access the same opportunities and succeed in the same way as I did? Right? So these are the questions that we have to dwell with. So we as a team of 100 people have gone through multiple learning spaces where we have had to look at our own identities. Through that, then understand that when I'm talking to, say, a policymaker or a politician or a bureaucrat or a school principal or a teacher, how am I using empathy, helping them encounter their own identities and encounter their positions of power and shift some of these barriers?
Heavy but wonderful perspective to have is whom am I making invisible? That's so profound, so telling. And like you said, focusing on life skill while it mattered, it's beyond life skill. So how are you now bringing in elements of how do we have those kind of realizations to 1000x Vishals than just one?
Yeah.
And to those realizations, how do you kind of bring it to the mainstream? What's the thought or what's the work that's being carried out on that front?
So one is in the work that we do with governments, state governments across the 7 states we work in. How do we build deeper relationships with people in positions of power from a space of empathy? And through building these authentic relationships, so typically what an NGO does when they want to partner with the government, you say, okay, here's my program, here's my curriculum, here's my intervention, take it. And take it to 1 million kids in your system. We said that's not going to work. What I have to be able to do is build a relationship with the bureaucrats so that I'm able to get them to a place where they can authentically share what is the core challenge in their context, what is holding them back, how are certain powers at play that are preventing them from creating the changes that they want to create in the system, and how do we support that? Because what we've also come across is that there are amazing bureaucrats around the system. There are amazing policymakers. There are amazing school leaders. There are amazing teachers. But no one's really listening to them. No one's really understanding their own understanding of the problem, their own context. No one's even understanding that, okay, you probably know in this particular block or district or state, this is what the problem is. This is what the solution is needed. But everyone is bringing solutions from outside and saying, do it now. Right? So we kind of shifted gas. So now the relationships are
real contextualization.
Yeah.
Contextualizing the problem and the solution to that particular problem rather than making it very generic. Is that how I kind of read that?
Absolutely. And sometimes that takes a year and more, right? Because, even the bureaucrat is in a hurry saying, just give me a solution and let's roll it out. We're like, no, we don't have a solution for you. Let's build these relationships. Let's deepen the understanding. Let's spend time on the ground. Maybe a year later, if we do recognize that there is a solution that's aligned to you and what we can bring, we'll do something about it. If not, then we'll walk away. We're not force fitting a certain solution into the system. But in that 1 year encounter of deepening the relationship with the bureaucrat, am I able to shift that bureaucrat's lens of themselves in the way they understand
Through
their
empathy.
identity? Through empathy.
Wonderful. Just stretching that conversation a little further, is that what took Vishal the builder to the creator of ecosystems now?
Honestly, that was not so much my work. It was really the work of Sucheta, who's the current CEO at Dreamertrain. She took on the role of the CEO in 2018. Before that, from 2013 to 18, she was the COO. So this vision of shifting system mindsets is really Sucheta's idea, and I've really just been supporting that idea. So one of the things that I contributed in that journey was after the transition of the leadership, the board kind of gave me an opportunity to design my own role and say, for 6 months to a year, explore and see what you want to do and contribute, how you want to contribute. So what I did was build some of these narratives and ideas into the global education transformation space. Again, a big realization was that a lot of the education transformation narratives come from the West, come from the global North. And many systems in the global South just take them on without really, again, contextualizing or seeing what works in our context. So I took on the role of then shifting some of the narratives in the global North, challenging some of the narratives, being in spaces where I could contribute and bring insights from the ground, from India into the global spaces. That's when then the writing of papers, doing research, contributing to global policy came in, while Sucheta was building a team to shift systems internally in India.
And I draw parallels to what your journey has been to the corporate world, Vishal. There has been multiple pivots. There has been leverage, like you kind of said, you kind of looked into it, and from a very process-oriented kind of stuff, you move to a system, you move to a platform kind of stuff. Somebody wading through this in a corporate world, what is your mantra for them to manage these pivots? How did you prepare yourself to manage those pivots? A, you need to identify the pivot in the first place, and B, have the necessary stuff to kind of manage that pivot. So what would be your take on that, both of it? Identify and then prepare.
Let me reflect on it a bit. I think there were 2-3 things that worked in my case, which was more, I'm saying more personally in my case. One is my ability to recognize and understand trends beyond an institutional framework. So my ability to kind of step back and look at the meta level, what was happening in education, to be in spaces where I could listen and understand what was happening. So, for example, life skills and social emotional learning was becoming a mainstream idea even globally around 2014-15. So Lego Foundation was bringing it into focus. Many organizations in Latin America, OECD was beginning to talk about it. Harvard was beginning to talk about it. Yale School was beginning to talk about it. There were foundations in the Middle East that were beginning to talk about it. So I kind of said, okay, now this is the moment that is happening. The shift is happening. The education conversations are going into recognizing the foundational requirement of life skills, social emotional learning. I could bring a lot of that energy back into India to then support with our government partnerships, to support with our narratives in India. So that was one ability, the ability to step back and see. Second was at a personal and organization level, our ability to take pauses. We didn't see our journey as a linear growth journey that you keep growing. We always saw a journey that there are periods of speed when you're growing, and then there are periods of stillness when you pause, when you consolidate, when you understand what have you learned, what worked, what didn't work. Are we still relevant in the lives of young people? And if Dream is not relevant in the lives of young people because we no longer understand the challenges in a fast-changing world, then do we even need to exist? And so every few years, we asked ourselves that question. Is Dream still relevant in the lives of young people? Is what we're bringing to the table still useful for the ecosystem? So those pauses, I think, were very important. And sometimes it will be a full year of pause where we will not grow, but we'll just sit back, dialogue, do reflections, go through processes using art to understand what was happening to us and to the world around us. That was the second piece. The third was the role of mentors. I had mentors in India, I have mentors globally. I had mentors who were from the education field, but also mentors who were completely disconnected from education, but in completely different fields. And those helped me understand again how the world is shifting, what's happening in the world. Again, where are we in relation to the world? How are we relevant in relation to the world? So that was the third piece, I think, that helped me be ready for these pivots and be able to go into these pivots. Some of them also we kind of stumbled into as we started building.
But that's a good take. So you pause, you kind of look at it, look at signals that is kind of driving some of these changes, and also see people who have gone down that path as well, the role of mentors.
Yeah.
And as things would have had, your responsibilities didn't kind of become less and less, but it became more and more.
Yeah, they did.
As the scale of the operation organization became. And in this process, what was hardest for you to change internally for you?
Yeah, that's another good question. So in the first decade as a leader, I was a confused micromanaging leader. In the second decade, I had to build the skill to let go, build the skill to trust my team, trust the culture, trust the institution building process, which was very difficult for me. To not have access to information about what's happening in every single focus area that we have, not be involved in every single decision that's being taken across the organization. Those are the difficult things to let go. And then I had to work on myself saying, where is that lack of trust coming from? And of course, it was deeply connected to my own experience of education, which deeply taught me only competition, didn't teach me teamwork or collaboration. I was in a school environment where the teachers themselves said that you need to do better than the next guy. If you want to be first in class and you don't share your notes with the other person, you don't share your learnings and knowledge with the other person. So distrust was very much built into my DNA because of the school system. So then learning to trust that we are in this together. This actually, Sujata gave me a beautiful insight in those days. She said there's one approach of a leader, which is my approach, which is that I have a vision and I'm running towards that vision. And I don't care whether someone is running as fast as me or not. When I turn back and I see that the team is way behind, and then I'm literally dragging it. So at one level, I'm running at 100 meters, 100 miles an hour kind of speed. But at another level, I'm dragging the team towards my vision. The other approach, which is her approach, it is that you start with where the team is at and you work together and you walk together. So it's not so much that you need to reach a certain destination. It's more important that you're walking together. Because if you're walking together, it's likely that you will achieve more. You will get further and you will take everyone along and you will learn along the way that there are others also who have ideas and visions and can contribute to your own journey and learning. So that was for me the big shift that I had to make.
Wonderful. And you can kind of see that evolution, right? From being a micromanager, now being that kind of a leader who completely enters the team and the team rallies behind him.
Yeah.
Wonderful. So Vishal, in all of this journey, if there's one insight that your journey has clarified for you about change, what would that insight be?
I think the most obvious insight, which everyone knows, is that it takes time. Change takes time, especially when you're working with human lives. But I think the more difficult insight is that everyone has their own version of change. Everyone has their own vision of change. So someone out there believes that we need to double down all our efforts on numeracy and literacy for children. And have children go to school at the age of 3. So they're ready for like actual school at the age of 6. There are someone like us who believes that, life skills are important. There's someone else who believes that, no, we need to take teachers away from the equation and use technologies. And that's the way we'll be able to reach every child in the remotest parts of the country. And there's someone else who believes that teacher is core to learning, and no learning will happen without a deep, committed relationship between the child and the teacher. Someone believes that AI is the way to now transform education. That in the last 1 year, every single conference, global, national, has had AI in education, and is going to be the savior of education reform in the world. And someone believes that, the kind of inequities we're dealing with, AI is not going to solve for the inequities, for the mindsets of inequities that we carry in our society of class, caste, gender, and religion. So how do you address that? So each one is coming with their own vision of education. And sometimes they go into conflict. Also, it's almost like we are pulling at each other rather than finding ways to kind of have a shared vision, shared purpose. That's been our struggle too, right? Well, and the learning has been that an institutional approach to such large-scale ecosystem exchange will always have limited impact, because institution will have to have its own agenda. It's driven by who gives it funding. It's driven by my own understanding of what the problem is and what change is needed. How do we move away from those institutional identities to more humanistic, ecosystemic identities, which help us kind of let go of our agenda, our identities, our belief system, and build a more broader shared purpose, which is in the
Holistic agendas, holistic intent.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Shall we always leave our listeners with a micro experiment that they can try for themselves? For all the listeners listening out there, if there's a micro experiment that you would invite the listeners to try, what would that be?
Can I offer two?
Of course.
Okay. One, very simply, that if you have a child in your home or in your extended family, and if you get a chance to go to a parent-teacher meeting, say if you're a parent, so instead of asking the school or the teacher what my child is learning, or whether my child is getting homework, or how my child is doing in their examinations, if you could shift the question and ask the teacher, is my child learning to make friends? Is my child learning to be helpful? Is my child learning to be kind? Just that shift in question. It will force also the teacher and the school to kind of sit back and say, okay, what is really the purpose of education? Is it the completion of a certain syllabus, or is it about building human beings that will shape our society 30 years from now? So that's the first experiment that I'll invite parents out there to do. The second is something that I've lived by since I started this work. It was through an encounter with a beggar, with a child who was a beggar on a traffic signal. When we see someone begging at a traffic signal, whether it's a child or an adult, we kind of look away. We feel awkward. Sometimes we might give money, sometimes we might not. But the tendency is always to kind of look away, to not look at what one would call decay in our society, something that's not nice about our society. And my invitation is that whether you choose to give them money or not, look at them, make eye contact, acknowledge them as a human being, because that they deserve, that level of dignity, respect they deserve. Why they are on the streets, why they're begging, we don't know. But they are a human being sharing this wonderful world together. If you could just look them in the eye, give them a smile, even if you're saying, I'm not going to give you any money, but I'm just going to look at you and acknowledge you as a human being. That makes a huge difference.
Absolutely make a whole lot of difference. Thanks for sharing that powerful micro experiment, Vishal. I hate to kind of draw curtains to this wonderful conversation, but all good things needs to come to a close. This show is all about creating ripples of inspiration. Before you and I sign off, what's your Inspire Someone Today message to all the listeners?
Let's all take a pause in this world that's pushing us towards more and more and more and more, and more speed and more consumption. Just let's take a moment for ourselves, and let's take a pause and celebrate this beautiful world we live in.
That's a message out there, my dear listeners. Let's celebrate in the pause. Take a pause, take a moment to reflect on beautiful things around us. It can be people around us, it can be situations around us, it can be things around us. Let's appreciate to what we have around us. On that note, Vishal couldn't have asked for a better masterclass of change makers than what you kind of shared with me and my listeners today. Thank you so much for doing this, and wishing you and all of your endeavors a wonderful 2026 and beyond. Continue to kind of create those ripples of inspiration.
Thank you, Srikant. It's been such a pleasure to have this conversation with you.
Thank you for spending this time with us. Conversations like this remind us that growth doesn't always come from answers. It often comes from better questions. Inspire Someone Today began with the belief that each of us has the power to make a difference. Not through grand gestures, but through everyday choices. That belief still holds, now with a little more depth and a lot more listening. If something from today's episode stayed with you, carry it forward, share it, sit with it, or explore it further through the IST community or the book Inspire Someone Today. Until we meet again, stay curious, keep inspiring, and inspire someone today.